Björn Este, the founder of Oatly, who I am sure has had his fair share of interactions with journalists and other, creatures out there after the very successful introduction of Oatly at the Nasdaq Stock Exchange recently. And also, I must say, Björn, you're also one of the great road builders between the US and Sweden, because this initiative that we just heard about is also part your work. Good to have you here. Let's talk not so much about Oatly, because I know that you're kind of, limited in what you can say to the audience now that you're listed. But still, I guess you can tell us a bit about the journey and also what others could learn from that.
I came here to California in 2013, and food and food tech was not really a big deal there, but I witnessed firsthand in the front row, really how the market has exploded over here, and how incredible investments, many successful companies, Silicon Valley. We think of Silicon Valley as being the center of computers and maybe biotechnology to a certain extent, but it really is becoming the center of food and food tech now too, which is really fun and exciting, of course, for somebody, an oat nerd like me that have been in the oat industry and food tech industry. We started with food tech before the term was even coined, right? So one of the world's first successful food tech companies for sure.
That's wonderful to hear, Björn. So I'm not drinking Oatly today. I'm actually having a beer because this is the last session of the day. So you can have it. You could drink your Oatly. I'm onto something different. No, but what was the story? Because it's not only you; it's also your brother, and you defined yourself as oat nerds. And for how long have you worked with oats and drinks?
Yeah, I mean, the credit is really to my brother, right? I mean, it's his fault, everything. Had it not been for him, I'd be, chilling somewhere else and taking it easy. But he's the genius behind the whole thing. He's a food scientist from Lund University. And I think the story goes way back to the 1960s when, before he even started at his PhD program and started studying food science, that what was to become his professor, his mentor, his guide, Professor Dahlqvist, discovered lactose intolerance. So lactose intolerance, as we say, is a Swedish invention too, right? At least discovery. And you can imagine then, so when he joined the university in the 70s, that he grew up academically, if you like, in an environment where milk also equals issues, right? They realize that there's stuff that may not be so well thought out in the world of dairy and milk. And one thing led to the other. And then in the late 80s, he started tinkering with ideas of making an optimal milk. Dairy has a lot of issues with it, as we all know. It's also a product that is very culturally entrenched, particularly in the Nordics. There's some other pockets, the Maasai, for example, in Eastern Africa. Interesting pockets around the world where milk is extremely deeply rooted in the culture. And anyway, so we can talk about that for hours too. But one thing led to the other, right? He started looking at the issues with dairy and tried to find a better way, a more sustainable way, a more economical way, a more nutritional way to provide a liquid food, a food that has the macronutrients, protein, fat, carbohydrates, and that has it in proportions that are better suited for humans. And that's sort of the entry point where he started looking at all kinds of plants and landed very rapidly in oats as a premier source.
Now you said that magic word, milk for humans, and you say that milk is not for humans, really?
Well, I mean, we humans, particularly in Northern Europe, and we owe a lot to milk as a nutritional source in times of starvation, or in tough times. I think the Nordics, we survived the long, harsh winters thanks to our ability to consume dairy. So absolutely, it has an important part of our diet, and there's a reason why it's considered almost holy, right? But the fact is that, of course, milk is made for a cow to deliver to a calf that will more than double its weight in its first year and whatnot, right? It's really, humans are really the only mammal that gladly enjoy milk from another mammal. It's kind of funny when you start thinking of the concept that we should actually drink our own milk. I mean, that sounds pretty disgusting, right? And we all go like, oh, right? What do you mean, drink our own milk? Nah, I'd much rather have that from a cow. So you know, you could arguably put forward the reason that cow milk is actually not made for humans; it's made for calves, and who could argue against that, right? So if you are drinking as a human now, I think the dairy industry like to lift up the protein content in milk as a very important reason why milk is such a good thing, and that milk is potentially also a really good source of calcium. Both of those statements are typically the number 1 and 2 sales arguments for dairy, and both of them are highly disputed in the world of science, right? Particularly in a world where we are not starving anymore, but we actually have access. And in fact, most people in the Western world certainly consume too much protein. And there's also arguments, research studies that imply that heavy dairy consumption is actually counter to good calcium absorption, right? The rate of osteoporosis, for example, is very high. It's higher in regions with higher milk consumption. So, you know, it's debated. It's obviously highly, contentious, because there's the big, strong financial powers behind the dairy industry.
Now you sound like a revolutionary here, Björn. I mean, like you're, but you're based on science. I mean, that's kind of the foundation of Oatly, because I think most people out there see Oatly as great marketing campaigns, but based in in the foundations you see pure science.
Yeah. Well, we came to a point in the history of the development of Oatly where we always felt, well, we were always from day one very proud of our research, right? Number of clinical studies that have proven that Oatly is extremely efficient at reducing LDL cholesterol, for example. It was very unusual, kind of almost never heard of in the early days of Oatly, that we actually told the world that we had patents on our process. And now you see that, but unheard of in previous times. That what do you mean, patent on a food, right? Tomatoes. How do you? I think that's sort of the whole precursor to the food tech industry, that you actually use and apply deep science to develop a product that delivers on the key parameters that you're looking for: taste, functionality, the health benefits, whatnot, right? So absolutely, and I think we came in our early days. Our marketing wasn't so impressive, but we felt that we had a strong advantage with our technology, and we came to a point where we decided that, okay, fine, we have the best technology in the world. Let's match that with the best marketing in the world. What can we do then? And that's how we did a pretty exciting management team research, and that landed in us hiring the current CEO, Tony Pedersen, that joined us in 2012. And his task was pretty much from us and the board and the owners to do exactly that, right? Take the best technology on the planet for this purpose, and now add the best marketing, because we knew inherently we had a story. We didn't tell the story we had inside. We were all that worked with it very passionate about the product's potential sustainability properties, right? And how often is it that you get this incredible opportunity to work with a company and a product that can do good at the same time as it's an extremely challenging, exciting business aspect to it too, right? So Felt blessed.
Yeah, but Björn, here when we talk about the shift that Oatly has instigated here, is it technology, is it marketing, or is it culture?
Well, it's first of all, it's a realization, I guess, of understanding your consumers and who are we going after, right? And who are the carrier of the Oatly message, or the who would be the ambassadors of this product. And it really is a combination of all of the above, right? Without one, it's a three-legged stool. You have to have them all. If you don't have an authentic message that sort of comes from within the company. A lot of the work there when we formed the branding and what the team did was to, introspectively look at who are we as a company, what do we want to achieve, and what's the people behind, the people that work every day in the company, what do they believe and what do they feel? And then there was an extremely strong passion around the whole sustainability message for sure, right? But also, providing a better product for more people around the world, from nutrition, from taste, from all those aspects. So the story, the passion, the sustainability, combined with the technology, are the foundation of a message that you can then tailor and present to the world, right? And I think there are many different trends that coincided. It's kind of interesting to see that most consumers around the world today don't trust big food companies, for example. And I think that's something, a reputation they have earned, if I should use that word, over the last 20, 30 years, where the whole branding messaging, it was broadcasted, right? Unilever built their success on being the best company in the world in TV commercials. They never really cared about the consumer. They cared about access to distribution channels and then dominate the airwaves. We consumers had very little choice. And I think when you're exposed in that world and grew up in Pepsi, Coke, Unilever, Nestle, all the big companies built their platform, built their success on owning distribution and owning the airwaves. Somewhere in that process, we lost confidence in them. We felt like, okay, well, they clearly don't care about me as the consumer. And I can't really trust them. There have been ample, food scandals. Nestle's milk baby food scandal in Africa. A number of these that keep adding up. And there was the whole thing with the E-numbers and ingredients and everything. So today...
Okay. But today then, so what should you own? If you don't own the distribution and the airwaves, what is the future? What is it that you need to own in the future to make these types of successes?
Well, today you don't have to own the airwaves because broadcast marketing doesn't work anymore. The consumers are too smart, right? And you don't have to own distribution because you have so many other ways to reach the consumers. I mean, not the least, the last 12 months now under COVID has put a big push on educated consumers to go buy online, which essentially for food was non-existing before. China and a few other countries were way ahead, but in the West, buying food and beverages online was, it was a very marginal business. That is changing rapidly. And also the whole, the change and shift in both retail and in food service on-premise with the evolution of high-end coffee shops, for example, that are very trend-setting, or specialized marketplaces like a Whole Foods development in the US and similar trends now in Europe. It's all of a sudden a plethora of channels to the market that didn't exist 10 years ago in the same way, right? So what that means is that it puts back the onus on the supplier to be authentic and honest and really be who, if you are lying to the consumers will get that. It's better. I think what Oatly has proven and showed so brilliantly to the world is that you have to be a person, right? You have your faults, you have your ideas, and you stand for something. And you have to accept that if I take a stand, I can't be wishy-washy and try to please everybody. there will be consumers, people out there that don't like what I do. And you have to live with that, right? I mean, the big food companies have always tried to dodge that and be pleasing to everybody, which means that you're nothing to anyone, right?
Yep.
And I think what Oatly has shown too, sorry, last comment on that is, if you take a stand and stand for something and you argue that, well, you get your haters, right? But then what happens too is that you create a debate. You have the haters that are debating the lovers, and the role of a company there is not necessarily to engage in that debate, but to support that debate. Let that debate take its life. Let create an environment where people can talk about a product, a company, a position, right?
But you, when you went to market, or when you cracked the code to the market, so to say, I might be wrong here, but then you have to correct me, is that you didn't automatically go for big distribution. You went for the baristas instead. Was that when you cracked it?
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
No. What was that when you cracked it, the way to the market, when you associated yourselves with the baristas and the cafe culture out there in the world, and had people suddenly crave oat lattes?
Well, there's no doubt, and I think there's starting to see a lot of classes in business schools around that strategy now, right? You need to find a hook and go after a category that is authentic, genuine, that matches and marries very well with your brand, your positioning, right? It's sort of selling to high-end cafes. I learned that personally myself firsthand. For example, in the early days of exploiting that strategy before we launched in the US, selling to cafes, you can't sell to a high-end coffee shop. They don't buy. They have extreme pride in what they do, and they look at suppliers that have brands, authentic stories, messages that they like, they can associate themselves with. Then they choose you, right? So unless you have, so the story, I would say, in the case of Oatly is more than some smart sales guy, let's go after the coffee shops, right? You can't sell to them. We picked, authentic thought leaders, trendsetters that everybody, they became trendsetters because they were authentic thought leaders with large groups of followers, right? And if you have a story that marries with their story, they will choose you. This is really like a sophisticated dating game, right? Which is far more than go to them and say, hey, guys, I got a good deal for you. I get you 10 cents off if you buy this many, right? So when you understand that, anything is possible in a very different way. And it so happened to be the coffee shops in the case of Oatly. It could have been, with chance, it could have been something else, right? But it was a confluence, a perfect storm. And the team learned when they were working on developing the barista version, which, by the way, is an entirely new patent. It's sort of Oatly 2.0. It was launched in 2014 and was developed together with some high-end coffee shops in Sweden and in Stockholm and people in the industry, in that industry. And I think what the team learned, which surprised many, was that we identified a hole in the market. There was a big demand for an alternative to dairy that actually worked. Soy milk and almond milk have, for example, taste notes and taste profiles that really doesn't marry very well with coffee notes. If your passion is to produce the best tasting coffee in the world, and then the consumer asks for almond milk in it, where you put your life and passion in developing these perfect notes and the perfect blends, and just see the consumer kill the whole thing by adding almond milk to it, right? That's big frustration. So when we showed and got the early adopters to realize that oats actually marry the coffee notes exceptionally well, all of a sudden the rest became easy, right?
Wonderful. So the Oatly journey, I mean, but that's only one part of your scientific empire when it comes to changing the world, right? Because you have a bunch of other stuff up your sleeve. Tell us a bit.
So we learned, yeah. I mean, we touched on it earlier. Oatly is really one of the first big, successful, serious food tech companies, right? It's based on deep science and technology. Well, once the invention was made and we started different projects, branched out into different organizations, we started mapping the oat genome. We started looking, and when I say we here, was really me and my brother. We separated the R&D from the Oatly commercialization team, actually way back when, already in 2008, to let the Oatly team run with the brand and do the sort of the production, sourcing, supply, where the deep science was isolated in a separate entity. And the reason for that was to actually let those scientists go bonkers, do whatever they wanted, let them loose. Because you can't really mandate an innovation, right? You can't have an R&D team that runs managed with a spreadsheet and a budget and, with quarterly reporting back. It doesn't work that way. You kill creativity. So it was all about creating an environment where creativity, curiosity was encouraged and it was allowed to fail, but keep going and look at how, and the guiding principles here was to develop foods that we could patent, so new technologies, right? And then prove clinically that they deliver true health benefits, as we had done early on with Oatly and its cholesterol-lowering properties, right? We saw that there's an incredible opportunity here. I mean, truly go back to the old Greeks and, let thy medicine be thy food and let thy food be thy medicine. Why shouldn't it be, right? We have incredible problems in the world. Sustainability is one deal, but the other part of that is the metabolic syndrome. We are killing ourselves by eating the wrong food and not exercising enough. Food can be part of the solution to the diabetes pandemic, to the blood sugar catastrophic situation now, right? Obesity or cardiovascular disease, high blood pressure, all of those are to a very large part avoidable.
So you're basically, Björn, so you're basically not out there to sell oat milk to the world. You're out there to cure the metabolic syndrome.
Correct. That's our purpose. If you look at me and my brother, that's what we're doing. We want to cure the metabolic syndrome, and we've learned the early first steps that oats is a key component in that fight. But there are more components. There are other things we can do. That's where now we're launching a product called Good Idea. It's a sparkling water. It tastes like a delicious sparkling water, slightly carbonated, fits with every meal, and it'll regulate your blood sugar, reduce the blood sugar uptake from that meal with 25-30%. That's an incredible improvement to your health, right? Help regulate blood sugar, avoid spikes. You don't feel tired after lunch, for example.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. I just want to chip in here with some sort of a remark. A couple of years ago, I did a test. I was wearing one of these Dexcom patches that can measure your blood sugar level, and I went for my daily lunch sushi, and my blood sugar levels totally spiked, and it was sending beeps onto my phone, and that was really a horrible experience. And after that, I stopped eating sushi, and I missed it ever since. So basically, you're telling me I can get my sushi back again?
Yeah, well, you could look at it that way, yeah. But you should switch from sushi to sashimi. Skip that rice. That's really the culprit, and the fish is good for you. So. Don't give up on your sushi. But in essence, if you drink Good Idea with your meal, what happens is that over time you will get much less sugar cravings, right? So it actually helps you wean you off your sugar addiction. And sugar, it's really any fast carbs. So you will find that with a healthier, balanced blood sugar over time, it's okay to indulge and eat a lot of, sugary products, ice cream or sushi in your case, right? Absolutely. It's all about over time having a healthy, balanced diet, not overtaxing on anything.
No, but that's
and
also
a
the
big
case.
challenge for us humans.
Yeah, but that's also the case of the metabolic syndrome. It has been created by our modern food habits and the stuff that the distribution system, as you're mentioning earlier, is actually pushing towards us. So this is all about one, curing the worst effects of that, and then trying to roll back the assortment of stuff that we eat that's really not good for us. Beyond the good idea drink, any more stuff that you have on the shelves of the research lab?
We have a lot. Yeah, we're working on products that address the diabetes and cardiovascular disease that are in clinical studies right now. I can't really talk more about it, but it's super exciting. The potential to develop product in that space is super exciting, right? It takes us into an interesting challenge in terms of, are we a pharmaceutical? Are we medical food? What are we, right? But foods that are good for everybody. And to test, I guess, the extreme, we actually launched a pharmaceutical company that's 100% food-based, where we're kind of odd and fun, but we've developed a beverage that tastes great, that is pleasant to drink, that will fill your bowel. So the doctor, when they x-ray your small bowel, they want to see the inside wall of the bowel and look for lesions, inflammations, and cancers or whatever. They need to fill the bowel with something that doesn't show up on the x-ray, but that expands the bowel and allow them to get those perfect shots. There are pharmaceuticals out there that have been doing this for 30, 40 years, but they are actually, for many different reasons, not very good. They're not far from perfect. And here we have a food product that do that now, and it's actually in phase 2B trials and go into phase 3 trials next year. But one thing we learned in that is that it's infinitely easier when you work with food to get through the pharmaceutical approval process. So I think maybe a company like that could be a trailblazer and open the road and avenue for more to see that we can actually take food and go through the whole pharmaceutical classification process. And when you look at the market potential for a product like that, it's incredible. So I'm very excited about that.
So you're not just satisfied with taking Oatly to the world. You just want to dominate this and have a bunch of other things out there, a whole portfolio of Oatlys.
Yeah, it's not necessarily world dominance that drives us. I think it's the excitement of working in a scientific world where we see endless opportunity. There's just no end to the opportunities in this space. And when you sit there and we have a group of scientists, a core nucleus of scientists that, bring in technologies from all over and make products, it's just so fun. It's an amazing possibility. And so why not? Let's go for it. And if I can help address some of the most critical health issues on the planet, what a privilege, right? Of course we're going to do that.
Okay, but then I must ask you. I mean, it's okay. So we start with something like a huge problem, a huge issue such as the metabolic syndrome, for instance. Then you apply science to that. Then you convert it into a food product, and then you take it to market through smart marketing. Is that the recipe for success for other entrepreneurs out there?
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so that's kind of easy, easy peasy four-step method. Yeah. No, but you also been successful in another way. I mean, we're so used here in Sweden. Of course, we don't have any food companies left in Sweden. We have resellers of international brands here. We do some basic production of, say, oats, for instance, and barley, wheat, traditional, of course, we have pigs and cows as well. But what would you say that the Nordics and Scandinavia can bring to the table here? Is it actually the curiosity, a scientific approach? We'd like to try new stuff. What is it that could make this place a better food hub?
I think it's a great question. It can really it's worthwhile pondering a lot on that question. But I think some of the key factors that have made our biotech industry is so successful, right? I don't know how many biotech companies there are in Sweden now, but a few years ago there were, we were one of the leading biotech hotspots in the world. And that has relevance to what we're doing in the food tech industry, because there's a lot of the same stuff, a lot of the same understanding of proteins or enzymes and the fermentation techniques and whatnot that can be directly applied and reapplied from biotech into food tech. So we have a traditional culture of that's really important. And we have, thanks to the tech success, lots of entrepreneurs that are willing to, for philanthropic or commercial reasons, are interested in investing and developing new companies in our part of the world. I think that's very important. We have many companies now that are successful. We can show the successes, and I think Oatly's recent success is an incredible beacon of light for everybody. It's like, wait a minute, we can actually build a food company in this country, right? And I wouldn't say that, you sound almost a little too pessimistic. There is actually a lot of food being produced in Sweden. It's just that we don't really have those big, mega successful companies. But there's a lot going on, and it's a future. It's a future in that industry that is incredibly exciting, I think.
But this also means
you touched on another thing. I guess we come from a culture where we're not spoiled with really good food, and therefore we have been curious in adopting. And I would argue today, you travel around in the Nordics, the quality of the food we eat there is incredibly high, and the innovation level, and we are not afraid to experiment and try new stuff. Sometimes I find I go to, let's say, Italy, that arguably has some of the best, certainly in Europe, the best food, right? Neck and neck with French. They tend to be stuck in their own traditions and cultures, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it's not good for maybe driving innovation and new technologies.
But that's interesting because when we talk about Nordics and Scandinavia as a hub for food, and we talk about the fact that we don't perhaps have too much of a old school food culture that could actually be a beneficial, something that's beneficial to us, but not just to us, but to all other people out there who also lack a food tradition of the same level as, say, France or Italy, or so basically you could say we turned the food game upside down, and suddenly it is the old losers who become the new winners here.
Yeah, I think you can say that goes for many. There are many parallels, right? It's not unusual. Another way of expressing that is say that, well, we have to be smarter if we're going to survive in this case, in this space, right? We just have to outsmart the others. Otherwise, we have nothing there to do, right? We can't compete with the French on truffle sauce, right? Forget it. So what can we do instead, right?
Yep. Björn, you've also been part here in let's circle back a bit to Oatly, and you and I have had this conversation before as well. Going to the US, to me, sometimes it is the scariest thing an entrepreneur can do, because you're exposed to a super capitalistic system where everything is bigger and grander than what you've experienced at home. And would you recommend that journey to other entrepreneurs?
Absolutely, hands down, definitely. I would, flip that argument around. The beautiful thing, if you look at it in a different perspective, is that the US, it's big, but you don't come here and necessarily try to compete with mass market product from day one, right? But the cool thing here is that all the little niches are actually pretty big, because it's a big market. So if you're smart, in the Oatly case, we went to coffee shops, right? And not just any coffee shop, just the high end. That was enough to get 3,000 cafes or so in the first year, whatever the number was now, but something like that. Enough to generate a very good cash flow and a good launch pad. So whatever your segment, whatever your category you go after, if you're smart, if you're laser focused on a particular consumer group, it's a great advantage actually to have that opportunity to with the same positioning, branding, marketing, right? No issues with languages or different labels for different markets and all that stuff. So that's one aspect of the market here, and I think it's also very open for novelties and new stuff. Right? There's enough people here that are curious that it's an opportunity for new products. So you could argue, why go battle? Once you've settled, proved your concept in your home market, which I think in most cases is always a very smart strategy, right? Work out the kinks, figure out your production and quality and supply chain and whatever in a market that you own and can control. You want to take the next step. And so from Sweden, that tends to be you go to maybe the Scandinavian neighbors, or you go to the UK and maybe Germany, right? But already you could argue go to the German market that's a huge step. Is there a bigger step to go to the US instead? I would argue probably not, right? So I think I encourage people to try it out at home and go to the US.
Okay, so what we heard in the previous panel here about the highway to the Nordics, you would actually super support anyone to participate in that if they're keen on making it big like Oatly.
Yeah, I do, absolutely. I mean, you have to look at what's your product, what's your service, what is your offering, right? And it may not be for everybody, but I would be hard pressed to think that it's not for most. There's many ways to slice the cat, of course, but I think in many cases, going to the US is a good starting point. The other thing is that there's a lot of capital here now. It's not necessarily US capital, but there's a lot of capital in the US looking for investments in food tech. And that's when we took the initiative to the Nordic Food Summit, it was based on the realization that, Oatly's built awareness that we can actually deliver cool stuff out of Sweden, out of the Nordics. But, on the other hand, there's also a lot of money available over here. There's other parts of the infrastructure, co-packing, to help build business. It's in many ways easier here because you can outsource pretty much all the essential functions of a company, and there's a whole industry built around launching new brands and products. It's a little tougher in Europe in that sense with its fragmented markets, particularly access to co-packer and co-production facilities can be pretty tricky there. Much better here.
So one thing then that we could learn from the Americans. What should Swedes?
Yeah, as you know, it's rare, right? It's not every day we can say that there's something we can learn from the Americans, but they have come further along, and I say, we have been in Sweden, a group of people we've been looking at for years now. How can we develop better pilot plant and co-packing facilities to support startups, right? And it's getting better. It is definitely getting better, but the U.S. is much further ahead. But I think the other thing I hear about people in Europe look at the American companies, they tend to get these mega billion-dollar fundings here. And we all look at how can we ever compete with companies that have so much funding, they fill their coffers, their war chests are just 100 times bigger than ours. And I think every single time we look at that, we can safely conclude that it doesn't matter. It's not the size of the war chest. It's the easiest thing. I have managed companies for years now. It's the easiest thing in the world to spend money. To spend it wisely is a very different story. So don't be scared by that. In fact, don't take too much money and be smart about what you do with it instead.
Okay, so don't take too much money. That's also an advice for the entrepreneurs out there. Björn, when it comes to the final conclusions here of the journey you've been involved with, and that you also hope that others will take the same journey as you. And is there any final recommendations or advice that you would like to give them before we have to wrap up this session?
Well, I think it comes back. It's a lot of hard work. It's grit, and don't expect fast victories. Right? It takes time. You have to commit for the long run, and Same thing when you break into a new market. It takes a couple of years, right? You have to expect that and plan for that, and you know, don't let that scare you. And then occasionally there are somebody that succeeds in doing things very rapidly, but it does take time, and you know,
okay,
you have to be prepared for the long haul.
Okay, and then the final question. So when you look at the you know, the food companies out there today, the traditional food companies, the ones that we are used to seeing in the supermarket shelves, how many of those are still around 10 years from now?
Probably all of them.
All of them?
They change. Yeah, I think they'll change. They have to, but they still are very large organizations. There's a lot of inertia in the system too, right? I mean, we all seen the effects of COVID, for example, which unfortunately had a reaction to, you know, a lot of people went back to comfort food, cookies, Coke with sugar and all that stuff. So they're not going to go away. I think I think they have a challenge. They have an incredible challenge ahead of them, right? And they clearly all given up on innovation. And quite rightly, I don't think they should innovate because they can't, because of how they structurally work. But they also showed over the years that it's really hard to buy innovative companies and merge and integrate them with their businesses. They've pretty much across the board failed miserably on that strategy too. But there's going to be hybrid solutions here, where they go in and share some of their resources. They still own the distribution and control and distribution is still very, very important, particularly in bigger markets, right? I mean, it's long-term success in the US commercially hinges on how good you handle logistics. Because if you can't produce and ship products around on a big continent, economically, you're toast at the end of the day, you know. So they still have that. They are still actors. They're going to change. They're going to get slimmer, more nimble, and find new ways to cooperate and assimilate new innovations.
But they will be competing with a bunch of new companies, such as Oatly and the others, of course. Okay.
Yes.
That's for sure. Okay. Thank you so much, Björn, for joining us today and telling the Oatly story and giving us great advice. I salute you and I wish you a wonderful day and see you soon, I hope.